Hey guys, Josh back here again with you today. And hold on, this isn't gonna work. Hey guys, Josh back here again with you today for a movie review. This is a replica metal Knights Templar helmet that I have from a Halloween costume a few years ago. And I'm holding it because I'm reviewing Kingdom of Heaven, the director's cut today. So I'm reviewing Kingdom of Heaven, the director's cut, the Roadshow version. Basically has an overture and an intermission in it. It's about three hours, 194 minutes long, starring Orlando Bloom, Ava Green, Liam Neeson, and a lot of really fantastic actors in this just kind of really sprawling, epic medieval story. I've never seen Kingdom of Heaven before. I've seen bits and pieces of it on cable TV and stuff, and it's never really been something that's really drawn me in, and I believe that's because most of what I've seen is the theatrical version of the movie. And I wanted to watch this movie. I wanted to sit down and check this movie out because it's just one of those examples where I've heard of a theatrical cut of a film not being very good, just not really grabbing enough people, not really being coherent or told well enough. And this is one of those almost sort of shining examples I've heard of from like over the past decade of a movie where the theatrical cut can really change your perception on what the movie actually is. So I wanted to check this out. It's directed by Ridley Scott, who's one of my favorite directors, the director of Blade. One of my favorite movies. He also directed Gladiator. So he directed Gladiator back in 2000. 5 years later, he comes back with Kingdom of Heaven. And early 2000s were like kind of a big time for those sort of swords and sand and sandals movies. Like Troy, Kingdom of Heaven. So this movie, like I said, it is 194 minutes long. It has been also criticized as almost being too long, too overdrawn. I do not think that's the case at all. I think that this is definitely a very epic movie. So it's basically telling the story about a blacksmith in France in the 12th century during the Holy War, the Crusades. And he is basically a blacksmith, and he's a bastard. He lives kind of outside of this king's castle, obviously, that he's in this village of under the shadow of this castle, and a crusader kind of comes in and basically reveals, and this crusader's Liam Neeson, the blacksmith is Orlando Bloom. Crusader basically comes in and tells him he is his father. He's kind of been off the Crusades, and he basically wants him to come back to Jerusalem with him on the Crusades. He wants to kind of turn him into a knight. He wants to instill those values in him. And these are very different Crusaders because it shows that there's like sects that sort of break off. There are these sects that break off from the main organization of the Templars, whereas they are very bloodthirsty, and this is part of the message of the movie, very bloodthirsty, very intolerable Christians against these very fanatical Muslims, the army of Saladin, which is in this movie. If you're a history buff and you just kind of know a lot about history, I think you'll really enjoy kind of watching this movie and seeing these events take place done in such a high budget film. So it's kind of showing these two, all these ideals kind of clashing together in the movie. Whereas the traditional Templars believe in fighting for God, fighting wars for God. These other Templars believe more in, and they're not even really Templars at this point anymore. They're just these sort of virtuous knights who pretty much want there to be a toleration of all religions in Jerusalem, a quote-unquote a kingdom of heaven, where they get the title of the movie from. And this is shared by the leper king in Jerusalem in that time, King Baldwin IV, who was kind of like a converted Christian, and he basically wanted all these religions to be able to live in Jerusalem, where some do actually. There are Muslims and Christians and all kinds of denominations of faiths living together within the city, and that's what makes the city so tolerable, so peaceful, so desirable to people who don't live in Jerusalem, and who are making basically like these pilgrimages to Jerusalem to pretty much all practice their faith in harmony. So that's kind of like the whole backstory, the whole thematic undertone to this film is all about these sort of religions, in ancient times trying to, live alongside each other, which is something that we're unfortunately still dealing with today in the world. So it's a very powerful message in the movie and a very powerful theme, I believe, to sort of present in this way by going back to the roots of all of these origins for all these religions and the conflicts that they all, again, unfortunately share. You also have Ava Green in this movie, who plays Sibylla, who is the Queen of Jerusalem in the film and brother to King Baldwin. And so she plays a very important part, and for Orlando Bloom's character, she kind of plays like a sort of a romantic interest for him, because you really see this blacksmith go on a journey from being a very disillusioned Christian whose faith is faltering at the beginning of the film due to the sudden suicide of his wife. So he's kind of going through a period of grieving and whatnot, as this sort of dilapidated blacksmith who's kind of really losing faith and hope in life. And so you kind of see him find this purpose to go to Jerusalem to kind of find peace from hearing about the city. And you have him with Queen Sibylla start a kind of romantic kind of thing, and so you really see this character start from rock bottom and really sort of build himself up and find a really good purpose in his life and a really good thing to fight for. It's a really nice story kind of going all throughout the film that really, I guess, in the director's cut, I have not seen the theatrical cut, so all I can really go off of is what I saw in the director's cut, which I really liked. It was a very well thought out and complex story. The story was written by William Monahan, who won an Oscar for The Departed. Also wrote more recently wrote a film that I actually really like and find it on Amazon Prime called Mojave, with Garrett Hedlund and Oscar Isaacs in that film. Another thing that I really liked about the movie that was really what elevated it to the extent that I enjoyed it thoroughly, something that I'm always a sucker for personally, is the cinematography in the movie was really, really well done. The cinematographer was John Mathewson, who also did the cinematography. More recently, you probably saw it on X-Men First Class, as well as the Man from U.N.C.L.E. He also did the cinematography on that. Was really stylish, nicely shot film. And then he also worked with Ridley Scott again on Gladiator, so they're kind of a good team working together when it comes to creating these environments. And that's what I really liked, is because the things that I think were the best parts with the cinematography and the way the film was shot was the backdrops behind the scenes that the characters are speaking in. It almost kind of reminded me of that really old technique that filmmakers used to use decades ago, well, basically back during silent films, where they just have these huge physical painted backdrops because they didn't have green screen. They just had these massive physically painted backdrops behind the characters that really kind of painted a scene literally for the viewers. They do something similar with this, although it's just so well done, you kind of really believe that all these places, these wide sort of spanning landscapes of like the French countryside or large city of Baranones out in the middle of this sprawling Middle Eastern desert. You just see these massive fortresses and stuff behind these huge spanning armies. Another great thing about the film were the action scenes. You just have like these massive battles that were actually fought in history, and they really captured the just scale of those battles, of these medieval battles, with these massive armies belonging to Jerusalem, Baldwin's army, and then Saladin's army, and then the Templars. So all this together just makes for an incredibly epic film. I personally thought. For me, I'm really into sort of like these period dramas, especially when it's taking place like in medieval times. It's just such a fascinating period of time for me, looking at it. Sort of historical movies dealing with the times of like swords and suits of armor and horses and all that. With I think like Braveheart and Troy. And kind of off to a different extent, Lord of the Rings, fantastical. But after seeing this kind of right up there again with me, with those things like Troy, Gladiator, Braveheart, all those kind of movies. It really does tie together in the director's cut in this really just sort of beautiful cinematic experience. I really enjoyed it. So for this movie, I give it a solid A, which probably I give this movie a 9.5 out of 10. I really did enjoy the movie. The acting is fantastic. The action scenes are fairly breathtaking. The cinematography is beautiful. The direction is very good. The writing, the dialogue is really good as well. And the score, not forgetting that. The score being composed by Harry Gregson Williams, who you may have heard more recently on The Martian, The Equalizer, those kind of films. The score really helped elevate a lot of these scenes where you're just kind of staring at these really nicely shot large landscapes with armies and with villages and towns and castles, and it really was quite an enjoyable film to spend the 194 minutes on. So yeah, 9.5 on the director's cut, the Roadshow edition with the overture and intermission for Kingdom of Heaven. So until next time, thank you for watching.